Hello everybody, this is Jan Vojáček. Welcome here at the studio of Newton TV, and I would like to warmly welcome here my dear guest, Dr. Thomase Verny. Nice to having you here, Thomas.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
It's really my great honor to sit here with you because I know you traveled a long journey here.
Yes.
Where do you live now?
We live in Stratford, which is a small town just outside of Toronto. Canada.
It's a long journey. And you spreading a very important message to environment of our conscious point of view on the topic like what is going on with us on the level of body-mind, and where did really start our problems in our lives.
That's right.
You are author of great books, and this is what I want to talk about. One of the book is Embodied Mind.
Yes.
Embodied Mind, and the second one is the Secret Life of the Unborn Child. And these topics are unbelievable and really amazing.
Yes, thank you.
One of the first thing I would like to ask. You are a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist,
yes.
That's
right. And we can call it that your approach is not really conventional. Is that right?
That is absolutely right, yes.
And I would like to ask, how did it happen that you switch from the conventional point to some kind of unconventional? How did it happen?
Yes, that is a very interesting subject. It's a very interesting subject. I think it happened because of my general approach to life, that I sort of have a tendency to question everything. And if somebody says, "This is a glass of water," I look at it and I want to make sure that it's actually water, okay? I don't just take somebody's opinion that this is a glass of water. I want to have a look at it, smell it, taste it, make sure it's water. When I studied psychiatry, we were told that children before the age of 3 could not remember anything. Then I started to have the experience with my patients who seemed to remember very accurately things that happened to them before they were even born or very shortly after they were born. Can I tell you one incident?
Please.
Okay.
It's really interesting.
So what happened was that I was sitting with a patient, just like we are here, perhaps a little bit more comfortably, and no microphones.
Yeah.
And we were discussing one of his dreams, because I've always been interested in dreams. And suddenly he started crying like a little baby. And he cried for about 10 minutes, and then he came out of it, like he came back into the room, so to speak. I asked him what happened. He said he had just found himself in a crib, in a baby crib. He was a tiny little baby, and he was crying for his mother. Mm-hmm. And then he said, being a somewhat skeptical young lawyer, about 26 years old, he said, there's something wrong with this picture because I've actually seen photographs of myself in a crib. And that crib was always blue. But the crib that I've just found myself in now, just a minute ago, was white. So I wonder whether I'm making this up or what. So I said, well, he was a young man. His mother was still alive. Go home, speak to your mother. Perhaps she can throw some light on this. So next week he came back for his regular meeting with me. And he said, this is amazing. But it seems that the first 2 months of my life, my parents did not have enough money to buy me a crib. And they borrowed a crib from a neighbor. And that crib was white. And only 2 months later did they buy me my very own crib. Being a boy, it was blue, and that's where all the pictures were taken. So I had no idea that the first 2 months of my life I was in a white crib. Nobody ever told me. Nobody ever talked about it. So when I heard that, you see, I was very well educated, in quotation marks, and I was told, don't believe these stories. They cannot happen. It's impossible. But this was a perfectly sane young lawyer who was telling me this. I've seen it right in front of my eyes. I have to start believing. And then sort of I told some of my friends about this experience, and then they started sort of telling me about other people who have had similar experiences. And if I may tell you one more story.
Please.
Okay. So there was a radio interview with a very well-known conductor in Canada by the name of Boris Brott. And he was being interviewed on the radio like we are here. And at the end of the interview, I guess they ran out of questions or whatever, which will never happen to you, but it happened to them. And he was asked, well, tell me, Boris, where do you think your conducting career started? And he said, to everybody's shock, it started in my mother's womb. And everybody went, what? What are you talking about? So he said, well, it seems that when I just started studying some of the musical compositions, the cello line, before I even turned the page, seemed to jump out at me, like I knew what the next few notes would be. So then I went home and I spoke to my mother about this. Perhaps she could help me understand this. And she said, well, what is the particular piece that seems to be so familiar to you? She was a cello player. And he told her. And she said, that's the piece that I was practicing when I was pregnant with you.
Unbelievable.
So when I started getting stories like that, I began to wonder, you see, because of my of my attitude towards life, I began to wonder whether the accepted wisdom that I was being taught at Harvard University, University of Toronto, some of the best universities in the world, really was wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I started studying the world literature, medical journals, all kinds of other resources, and try to find some biological explanation for this. Because stories like this are interesting, but they don't prove anything. You have to follow it up with science. Otherwise, people will not believe you, okay?
Yeah.
So it may be entertaining, but it's not science. So then I spent about a year putting things together, and then I started to write a book on it, and the book then became a huge success. And the rest is history, as they say. The Secret Life of the Unborn Child has now been published in 33 countries. And now it's also available in Slovak and Czech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know that, and we are so happy for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes there is like kind of scientific approach.
Yes.
And even here in Czech Republic, if you like think more unconventional,
Mm-hmm.
it's considered like to be pseudo-scientific, like
Right.
something like esoteric.
Right.
But your approach was very rational.
And scientific.
And scientific.
And scientific, yes, I know. And you being sort of also on the borders between sort of medicine and what's considered a little bit pseudo,
Yeah.
right? You know from firsthand how scientists can be resistant to any new information. And certainly I had that problem 40 years ago when my book was first published. I also had some problem with feminists because some of the really, really radical feminists would, their first sort of response was, here is another man telling us women what we should do with our bodies. And of course, that's not what this is all about. What this is all about is like telling you that cigarette smoking is bad for you. If you want to smoke, go ahead. I don't care. But let me tell you what the science is showing. And if you want to live a longer and better life, stop smoking. So it's the same thing. When I started writing about not drinking, for example, alcohol, and that this was bad for pregnant women, you have no idea how many doctors attacked me for that. Mm-hmm. Alcohol is good for women. It helps them to relax.
Mm-hmm. So after these 40 years,
yes,
it's still considered
yes.
as something unconventional, something like not really scientific,
not proven.
Not proven. It's not still proven. Unproven.
Yeah. Well, but it is. Honestly, it is. I have I spoke for, as Karel Svoboda said a few minutes ago to you, I spoke yesterday at a large congress, and for 2.5 hours I spoke nothing but science. Mm-hmm. One scientific research after another. Epigenetics, looking at the effect of stress on the unborn child, from the best journals in the whole world. But some of these people who are so critical don't read those journals. They don't know what's going on. I am astonished that professors of psychiatry and professors of neurology and professors of pediatrics don't read some of the research that is being published. It is solid science, but they don't read it. They think they know everything. Don't tell me anything new because it might change my mind. And so they just are critical of things they don't really understand.
Yeah.
But I don't care. I mean, yes, I do care. But in a sense, I don't care because women read it. And that's what matters. That's what matters. And it is the women who tell their husbands. And so the husbands gradually change their minds as a result of the women who have read my book.
That's great. What is the practical applications of these findings for the lives of unborn child and women and so mothers and fathers? What is the practical application for these ideas?
Well, let's start with preconception. Before you ever conceive, research shows that how the future parents live will have an effect on their child. Mm-hmm. So, for example, just very simple, smoking. Research has shown that if a father smokes, that is going to affect his sperm, mm-hmm. the spermatozoa. And so when the sperm meets the egg and conceives of the new baby, there is going to be a negative effect on that child, okay? So the nutrition, particularly with your approach, nutrition, exercise, smoking, alcohol, all those things should be taken care of and should be watched before you conceive a child. Once you become pregnant, it is very important to avoid stress because stress is very, very negative on the unborn child. Stress is negative on you and me also. But in the unborn child, there are millions of cells being produced every second. In order to become the billions of cells that we are today, it takes millions of cells being produced every second of intrauterine life. So they're very vulnerable to stress because all these new cells are very vulnerable, much more than older cells in our bodies. So as I said, stress is bad for you and I, but it's even worse for the unborn child. And so one of the things that I really want people to understand is that if a mother who is pregnant is stressed, that is going to affect the structure of the brain, the connections in the brain, so that that child, if the mother is exposed to continuous chronic stress, not once in a while running after a streetcar, but it has to be steady and it has to be a lot, big, then the connections in the brain are going to be not right, okay? So that child is going to already be born with a hard wiring, as you know, from computers, with the wrong hard wiring in the brain. So we cannot expect that brain to work as well as it would have had there not been for the stress. So that child is not going to, perhaps, that child has a higher risk of developing autism or schizophrenia or attention deficit disorder, depression, anxiety, may have difficulty learning. Anything is possible. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I would also like them to know that a loving environment after the baby is born, a lot of affection, talking to the baby a lot, bonding with the baby, all of these things are going to be very healing. So although they may have, some damage may have been caused prenatally, it can be repaired. It's not written in stone. But of course, the more we can avoid it, the better, because then we don't have to treat it. So those are the things, first of all, that I would like people to know. And the other thing I would like them to know is that everything that happens during pregnancy and afterwards is inscribed in our cells. Not just the brain, but the whole body, which is why, you know, the subtitle of my book is about cellular intelligence. And so I would like them to know that talking to the baby, singing to the baby, dancing sort of with the baby, both by the father and the mother, is very, very important. It's very important for that child to feel that it is loved and that it has parents that are looking forward to welcome him into the world.
Yeah. This is something we are maybe missing more and more, because a lot of parents have a lot of things to do, you know, a lot of work and really busy time, a lot of stress. And this is why it's so important, because if we want to have a bright future,
yes,
it starts with our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there is a lot of talk now about responsibility, but what could be more responsible that how we take care of our children?
Very, very, very right. I think that if we want to have a better world, we have to treat our children better.
Yes.
Okay. Children who are loved, who are welcomed into the world right from conception on, and welcomed into the family after they are born, are going to be good shepherds of this world. They're going to take care of the world. Children that are abused in the womb, which could be like by smoking. I'm not talking about violence, but I'm talking about chemicals in the amniotic universe of the baby, which also includes, of course, stress hormones and other negative hormones. So children who are negatively impacted by the world, who are born and perhaps with forceps and a lot of pain, children who are put into incubators, don't see their mothers perhaps for 2 or 3 weeks.
It's a great trauma, right?
It's a huge trauma. It's a huge trauma. Children like that they get the impression right from the beginning that this is not a good world. This is not, do I really want to be here? And this is not a very welcoming world. And they will formulate certain ideas, which are totally in the unconscious, of course, but they will affect them for the rest of their lives. And so they may have a more negative attitude, become more aggressive and more violent as they grow up, rather than loving and caring of people and the world.
Yeah, I really don't get it. How is possible that our world has a lot of problems? There's a pandemic of the chronic diseases.
Yes.
Like on the level of physical body and psychological problems.
Yes.
Even younger and younger child and people, adults. From my perspective, we are great in treating symptoms, but why
develop the disease in the first place?
Yeah, and even if it's such a logical thing, that how important is the development of the child?
Yes.
Prenatal process and the giving birth, and after that, and even preconception stage of the.
Yes.
Why we are not get it?
Yes. It's a very good question. Some of it has to do with education.
Yeah.
Hopefully people who listen to you and I would imagine all your broadcasts, and especially this one, hopefully will start thinking differently. And they may still be questioning, which is fine, but at least they're asking the right questions, right? That's where knowledge starts. Okay, when Newton was watching the apples fall from the tree, he asked himself, why are they falling, right? So that's where science starts. That's where we can move into a better future. I think the problem with many parents and many people in general is that they somehow don't realize that children are capable of thinking, have brains, and have memories. So, I mean, when I was writing my book in the late 1970s, early 1980s, for example, it was widely believed by all doctors pretty well that newborns could not feel pain. And so newborns were having terrible, terrible surgery done on them without anesthesia. And these children never recovered. Many of them died because of the pain. And those who did not die were forever, ever sick in some major way, right? And it was only a few years later that doctors started to write about the fact that children can feel pain. So now we have agreed, okay? Like, I don't think anybody is out there who is questioning that. Well, let's hope that we can come to a point where nobody out there is going to question sort of the mental and emotional abilities of newborn and even unborn children. That's where we want to move into.
Yeah, I really thank you that last decades you are
pioneered
and has some integrity to, we need, if the collective mind should be changed somehow, there must be like integrity, to saying all the time the same thing, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth. Let's have a look, let's
right.
listen, and questioning things,
right.
So I'm very happy. Sometimes it's hard to get that it takes so long.
Yes. Yes. Why does it take so long?
Why does it take so long?
Yeah.
But it's how it is.
It is how it is. I mean, it's the same with other problems that we are facing, racism, prejudice, things like that. Why does it take so long to change people's minds.
Yeah.
So
what is your answer? Because you are a psychiatrist. Why our mind is so resisting to change?
Yeah, I
even if it's obvious.
Even if it's obvious, yes. Yeah, I think that human beings have not been constructed very well. I think we need a whole new race of humans.
We should question God and ask God, why you constructed human beings this way?
Yes. I've also written poetry. And in one of my poems, that's exactly what I say. God, go back to God's school. Learn how to make humans better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in all animals, when you look at chickens, they have this pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems for humans, in order to, if you don't feel very good about yourself, which is very easy because, sooner or later, as you're growing up, you're going to meet a teacher or a parent or an uncle or somebody who tells you that you're not good enough.
Yes.
And when people say good things to you, you appreciate that. But when people say something critical, you remember that forever.
Uh-huh.
It seems that when people say negative things about you, it has a stronger effect. And so it is very easy for all of us to run around and consciously or unconsciously remember something negative about ourselves. So just for example, when I was in school, very early on, grade 1 or 2, we were singing in a choir, and the teacher came over to me and said, "Don't sing. Just open your mouth because you have really bad ear," or whatever the expression is. So after that, I never sang again, okay? And I remember that forever. Like this is like 80 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So I never sang, and it also turned me off music for a long time. So it's just a little example of how a negative comment can stay with you forever. So all of us, unfortunately, have been exposed to some kind of a negative comments. And so in order to make ourselves feel better, we often have to look down on other people, okay? So, it's the color of your skin or your religion or because, you're walking with a limp or whatever it is, they're not as good as I am.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel better. And so we have prejudice.
Our lives is really, for our lives is very important, our system of beliefs.
Yes, very important, our system of beliefs, right?
And it's so penetrate to ourselves.
Yes.
That's right. It's connected with the idea embodied mind.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not about our brain only.
No.
The
it's
system
our
of beliefs
whole body.
And the memories
Yes.
and maybe thoughts
Mm-hmm.
are in our every cell.
Right.
Is that right?
It's that right. And one of the best proofs of that you can see in heart transplants. Okay, so there have been reports of a donor's heart being transplanted into a recipient's heart, and the recipient suddenly, let's say, who has always loved rock and roll, suddenly loves classical music. There's a huge change in their taste for music, or there's a huge change in their eating habits. Someone who was a vegetarian suddenly cannot stop eating hamburgers. So how did that happen? Well, the only explanation is that the cells from the heart of the donor carried memories of the personality and the likes and dislikes of the donor, and they were transplanted. So I write about transplantation of heart, transplantation of personality. Mm-hmm. Some of that personality is transplanted. Now, in terms of the critics, okay, the critics will say, well, what will they say? They will say, we have seen 90 heart transplants during the last 3 years, and none of them reported anything like this. Well, the reason they don't report, there are many reasons. But one reason is that they know that it is not done. In other words, that people might think that there is something wrong with them, that they have this feeling, so they keep quiet about it. Okay? It's like at one time when you didn't want to say that you were homosexual or something like that, They were in the closet, as they say in English. And so people are in the closet about their heart transplants. Also, the cardiologists, the cardiac surgeons who do this, I've spoken to a few of them. I said, do you ever ask your patients whether they have had any changes in their personality? They say no, never. So there is a general kind of agreement not to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could start talking about it and make it legitimate so that people don't get labeled as crazy or New Age, California, that kind of stuff, then perhaps we could have more reports about this. Mm-hmm. So I hope that through this book, through interviews like I'm having with you, Jan, there will be a freeing of ideas.
I hope so.
Yes.
And it could, this idea of embodied mind,
yes,
it could explain the why we have some kind of disease. Because, if some cells have
yes,
own memories and,
yes,
and consciousness,
absolutely,
or thoughts, we can call it like that, maybe, okay,
yeah,
we connected thought with our brain, but
yeah,
still, it could explain why there is a liver disease and kidney disease. If there is some kind of consciousness, if there is some kind of memories, why this
absolutely
should be not explaining the
yes,
disease?
Yes. Hopefully, as this science begins to develop, we will know more about just in the direction which you are pointing. In other words, there may be certain thoughts, ideas, feelings which collect more in the liver, for example, as
mm-hmm.
opposed to the kidney. More things collect in the heart than in the thymus gland, things of that nature. So I think that we'll be moving in that direction. And probably talking about ideas, thoughts, emotions. We probably need new words for these things, which we don't have. When we talk about computers, and which I don't understand very well, but like, where are the thoughts in a computer, right? But we know that when we put in, tell me when, I don't know, Jan was born, the computer will tell you. So was that a thought? Was that information? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So it's the same thing with cells in the bodies. Cells in the bodies are very much like these computer chips, and they contain tiny bits of memory. And when they work together and form a web, like the internet, then the total idea comes out.
Yeah. It's some kind of like psychosomatic approach.
Yes.
Because I don't know how you think about like body-mind approach.
Mm-hmm.
That and it's the same like we talked earlier, that I don't get it how the conventional medicine is still resist to this body-mind approach.
Well, yes. I like the way you put it, body-mind approach. Actually, most physicians talk about psychosomatic medicine. And notice the difference, right? Psycho, the brain, soma, the body, right? You said body-mind. I totally agree. But for a long time, medicine continued to think of the brain, the head, as the most important part of your body. And, when you look at this culturally, when you look at this historically, you can see how the head has always had much more of a focus. Mm-hmm. So people talk about the head of the tribe, the head of the government, who is ahead of the class, right? Getting ahead in life. So this whole focus on the head. Headhunters. That's right. Headhunters.
Headquarters.
Or headhunters.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Then it's not person hunters. It's headhunters. Right? So this whole focus on the head has also influenced science. So I think a couple of years ago we had, the year of the brain, or I think we had in the United States anyway. So scientists forget that the head is connected to the rest of the body, right? And the body is a lot bigger than the head.
Yeah.
So come on, start paying some attention.
Yeah. It's I think we are moving this direction somehow.
Yes.
There is some kind of still resistance of the scientific heads.
Yes.
And egos of the professors.
Right. Yes. Very much egos. And unfortunately, they have a lot of influence. People believe that someone, who is the head of the department, right? Chief professor and all that kind of thing, that somehow he knows more than everybody else. But unfortunately, that is not true. Because they know what they learned when they went to school, and then they continue teaching what they learned 20, 30, 40 years ago. And they very often are not in touch with new developments. And even when they are touching new developments, it's usually kind of a selective process, like only in developments that already support their belief system. Yeah. Right? And you mentioned belief system, and I think that's a very important subject because our belief systems really sort of organize our world for us. And even when I spoke briefly about racism and prejudice, it's all about belief systems, right? I've just I write for a large newspaper in Canada, the Globe and Mail, and I've just written a very big piece on conspiracy theories. And it is amazing how rational people still believe irrational things. Mm-hmm. And how does that happen? What makes them believe, that aliens are coming, for example, whatever. It's truly unbelievable. It's hard to believe. So how rational people come to believe irrational things is a really interesting subject, but that's for another day.
Yeah. One last question.
Sure.
What is your inner motivation to still going around the world? And you have a lot of things what you already did and what you've done, and what is your motivation? You can rest at your place in Canada. And
Yes. Enjoy the sunshine. Read, play chess.
How do you feel about your inner motivation to be here?
Well, my motivation is that I really care about this subject. I really care about what happens to the world. I look around me and I see a lot of suffering. I see a lot of pain in the world. And I would very much like to contribute any which way I can to lessen that pain. And that's my motivation. If I can help one mother have a better pregnancy, and as a result of that, a healthier child emotionally and physically, then I have, in a small way, contributed to make this a better world than I found it when I was born.
I think there's no other words to say. So, Thomas, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and energy. And really, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I really enjoyed it, and it was a pleasure, really.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.